Sorry, I already ate out.
The aroma of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen, every dish meticulously prepared, every plate carefully arranged. Marcus glanced at the clock for the 10th time in as many minutes, heart pounding with anticipation. He had spent hours crafting the perfect dinner for Olivia, hoping this night would finally bridge the growing distance between them. And then he heard it. The screech of tires on wet asphalt, the sudden slam of a car door. His pulse spiked, a mix of excitement and dread crawling up his spine. But the figure stepping out of the shadows wasn't Olivia. Confusion and fear twisted in his chest as he realized that something far bigger, far darker than a simple missed dinner, had arrived at his doorstep. Tonight, everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his life, would be tested, and nothing would ever feel the same again. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below with your current location and local time. I'd love to see where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the twists ahead. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, the sounds of the night pressing in on him, the faint hum of streetlights, the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze, and the distant, rhythmic drip of rain from the gutter. His hands, still hovering over the carefully set table, trembled slightly. The figure outside the door was partially obscured by the shadows, yet Marcus could feel its presence, a weight that seemed to press down on the entire house. He forced himself to step closer to the window, peering through the glass with a mixture of curiosity and unease, and in that instant, his chest tightened. Something about the way the figure moved was deliberate, purposeful, yet silent, almost as if it were gliding rather than walking. A shiver ran down his spine. His mind raced. It couldn't be Olivia. She always arrived with a cheerful smile, or at least a trace of one, even after a long day at work. But this silhouette, it carried no warmth, no hint of familiarity. The shoulders were squared, the gait unnervingly confident. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to call out her name, to break the tension, but fear rooted him in place. His hand, shaking slightly, found the doorknob, but he hesitated. The rational part of his mind whispered, it could be a neighbor, a delivery, someone needing help. But deep down, an instinctual warning told him this was no ordinary visitor. Marcus turned back toward the kitchen, trying to ground himself. The table looked impossibly perfect, the silverware gleaming under the soft overhead light, the candles flickering gently, casting warm, comforting shadows. He had spent hours preparing this dinner not just for the food, but for the moment, for the fragile connection he had been trying to salvage for weeks. Olivia had been distant, distracted, often lost in her own world of meetings, phone calls, and unexplained absences. Each day, Marcus had hoped that a carefully planned dinner, a small gesture of love and patience, could bridge the growing divide. And yet, standing there now, staring at the ominous figure outside, he wondered if all his efforts had been for nothing. The sound of the car door closing again, soft, deliberate, snapped him out of his reverie. Marcus's heart leaped into his throat. He edged toward the front door, each step measured, cautious. The anticipation twisted into a knot of anxiety and dread. What if this person had come for a reason he couldn't comprehend? What if it was a threat? A danger he couldn't anticipate? The thought of Olivia walking through that door, expecting a loving husband and a warm meal, collided violently with the shadowed reality of the night. He took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus. Rational thinking, a trait he prided himself on, urged him to remain calm, to assess the situation logically. Marcus moved to the door, pressing his eye to the peephole, but the figure was still shrouded in darkness. Then, a flicker of movement, a hand brushing against the car, a subtle shift in stance, and Marcus realized this was no ordinary passerby. The presence emanated authority, a confidence that was both unnerving and intriguing. His pulse quickened, a cocktail of fear and curiosity surging through him. Marcus's thoughts began to spiral. Could it be someone from Olivia's past? someone she had met before they married. The notion seemed preposterous. Yet the unease gripping him felt undeniably real. He remembered the subtle changes in her behavior over the past months, the secretive phone calls, the sudden bursts of laughter when no one else was around, the hurried explanations for inexplicable absences. He had tried to rationalize these moments, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But now, faced with this mysterious visitor, all those small inconsistencies coalesced into a chilling picture. The figure shifted again, and for the first time, Marcus noticed a glint of something metallic in the dim light, a brief, reflective flash, almost imperceptible. His imagination ignited. A package, a weapon, something else entirely. The mind, fueled by fear, can conjure horrors out of the smallest details. He wrestled with the rising panic, trying to steady his breathing, to push back the rising tide of dread that threatened to consume him. Suddenly, the front door opened slightly, not with a crash or a bang, but almost imperceptibly, a slow, deliberate movement that made Marcus's heart skip. The handle moved, the door creaked on its hinges, and the shadowed figure slipped inside before Marcus could react. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to call for help, but his feet refused to move. He watched, paralyzed, as the figure's silhouette filled the doorway, tall, imposing, and unnervingly calm. "Marcus," a voice said, low and controlled, sending a chill down his spine. The name, uttered by someone other than Olivia, carried weight, intent, and an unspoken warning. Marcus's mind raced. How did this person know his name? What could they want at this hour? In his home, in the sanctity of his kitchen. Every rational thought screamed to retreat, to secure the house, to dial the police, but a part of him, a stubborn, reckless part, wanted answers. The figure stepped fully into the light, revealing features just enough to unsettle Marcus. A sharp gaze, an aura of command, a subtle smirk that hinted at knowledge Marcus did not possess. Marcus's body went tense. The warm, inviting glow of the kitchen seemed suddenly inadequate, overshadowed by the tension that radiated from this stranger. He swallowed, his voice barely audible. Who are you?" The figure's smile widened slightly, a chilling contrast to the warm atmosphere Marcus had tried to create just moments ago. "Someone who knows what you don't," the voice replied cryptically. The words, simple yet loaded, seemed to hang in the air, heavy and oppressive. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something was about to happen. Something that would unravel every carefully constructed illusion of safety and love he had built in this home. Marcus's thoughts raced back to Olivia, the very reason he had prepared this night. Where was she? Why was she not here? And why now? In the midst of his anticipation and hope, did the presence of this mysterious figure shatter the fragile calm he had worked so hard to maintain? The questions surged like waves, relentless and unforgiving. In that moment, standing frozen in his own home, surrounded by the comforting scents of dinner and flickering candlelight, Marcus realized the night was no longer about reconciliation or affection. It was about survival, about truth, and about confronting secrets that had been festering beneath the surface for far too long. The air was thick with suspense, the kind that presses down on the chest, makes every heartbeat audible, and turns every second into an eternity. The stranger's eyes met Marcus's, sharp, calculating, as if reading every fear, every hope, every hidden thought. Marcus felt an odd mixture of vulnerability and determination rise within him. He knew, instinctively, that he could not turn away, could not cower in the shadows of his own home. Whatever this night held, it would demand courage, clarity, and an unflinching willingness to face the unexpected. And then, as if on cue, the distant sound of another vehicle's engine broke the tense silence. Marcus's mind jolted. Could Olivia finally be arriving? Or was it yet another twist, another layer of complication in what was rapidly becoming a night of relentless uncertainty? His pulse surged, each thump echoing the unspoken promise that whatever unfolded in the coming hours, nothing would be as simple or as safe as a quiet dinner at home. Marcus tightened his grip on the edge of the countertop, his knuckles white. The shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, darker, encroaching upon the flickering light. Every instinct screamed that he was on the precipice of something monumental, a turning point that would challenge his understanding of love, loyalty, and the fragile boundaries between trust and betrayal. In that suspended, breathless moment, Marcus realized one immutable truth. Tonight would change everything, and there was no turning back. Marcus barely had time to process the movement when the stranger shifted again. Stepping closer to the center of the kitchen, the dim light from the candles danced across their face, revealing sharp, almost predatory features. A look that immediately set Marcus on edge. His pulse quickened as his mind raced to make sense of the situation. Who was this person? How had they found their way into his home, into his private life? The questions ricocheted through his head, each one more urgent and terrifying than the last. He tried to speak, but the words seemed trapped behind the sudden tightness in his throat. The stranger's gaze didn't waver. It was piercing, intense, as though they could see straight into Marcus's thoughts, into the hidden fears he barely admitted to himself. "You weren't expecting me," the figure said softly, almost teasingly, yet the underlying menace was unmistakable. Marcus's stomach dropped. How could they know? Was this person some sort of stalker, or had Olivia's secret brought them here? The uncertainty gnawed at him, a cold, creeping dread settling into his bones. Marcus took a tentative step backward, his hand brushing against the polished surface of the counter. The warmth from the kitchen seemed suddenly distant, replaced by an icy tension that filled every corner of the room. He noticed the slight tilt of the stranger's head, the subtle shift in stance that suggested patience, calculation, and a terrifying confidence. Every instinct he had screamed that he was not dealing with someone ordinary. This person had a purpose, and it was likely one that would unravel everything Marcus thought he understood about his life. His mind flickered to Olivia, and he felt a pang of desperation. She should have been here, walking through the door with a smile, maybe teasing him about the candles or the carefully prepared meal. But she wasn't. And now, faced with this intruder, Marcus realized that the night he had envisioned one of connection, intimacy, and reconciliation was gone, replaced by a scenario he could scarcely comprehend. He clenched his fists, trying to summon courage, but his body remained tense, every nerve on edge. The stranger took another deliberate step forward, and Marcus noticed something that made his heart skip. A small envelope clutched tightly in one hand, its edges worn and corners slightly creased. The subtle gleam of paper against the dim light drew his gaze. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. Was this a message from Olivia? A warning? Or something worse? An ultimatum? A revelation he wasn't prepared for? The uncertainty made the air feel heavier, each second stretching into an eternity. "Marcus," the figure said again, voice calm yet commanding. "You need to see this." They extended the envelope toward him. Marcus's hands shook violently as he reached for it. The weight of the unknown pressed down on him, a mix of fear and anticipation so intense it was almost paralyzing. He tore the flap open, fingers fumbling, heart hammering in his chest. Inside was a single photograph. Glossy, sharp, and undeniable. Marcus's eyes widened. The image captured Olivia, but not as he knew her. She was in the company of someone he had never seen before, in a setting that suggested secrecy, something clandestine. His mind reeled. Questions surged uncontrollably. Why didn't she tell him? Who was the other person? And how long had this been happening behind his back? The photograph felt like a sledgehammer to his chest, a brutal, unrelenting truth that left him reeling. The stranger waited patiently, watching Marcus's reactions, almost as if savoring the torment. "You needed to know," they said softly. Marcus's jaw tightened. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the shock left him momentarily mute, The rational part of his mind tried to process the image, to think logically, to find an explanation, but the emotional impact was overwhelming. Betrayal, confusion, hurt, and disbelief collided in a storm of feelings that Marcus could barely contain. He sank into a chair, gripping the photograph like a lifeline, heart racing, mind spinning. The stranger remained standing, calm, a silent sentinel in the chaos Marcus felt consuming him from the inside. Every muscle in his body tensed as he tried to formulate a response. Should he call Olivia, confront her immediately, or should he try to understand the broader context before acting? The question swirled in his mind, but the weight of betrayal made every choice seem both urgent and impossibly complex. Marcus's thoughts wandered to the past, to the early days of their marriage, when trust had been absolute, when every glance and touch spoke of mutual understanding and love. How had it come to this? How had a relationship built on years of shared experiences, laughter, and intimacy been suddenly overshadowed by secrecy and deception? The image in his hand was a stark reminder that reality often diverges sharply from perception. The stranger finally spoke again, breaking the heavy silence. "There's more," they said, their tone measured. "You need to understand the full picture before making any decisions." Marcus looked up, anxiety mingled with curiosity. "More? What do you mean?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The stranger's expression remained unreadable, eyes unwavering, hinting at a deeper complexity, a revelation that had yet to unfold. As Marcus's mind tried to absorb the implications, he felt a sudden, almost overwhelming urge to know everything, to uncover the truth in its entirety before allowing emotions to dictate his next move. He realized that the night was far from over, and that this mysterious figure held the key to understanding the hidden layers of his life, the parts Olivia had concealed. Every instinct screamed caution, yet curiosity, that dangerous, irresistible force, pushed him forward. The stranger moved closer, placing another item on the table, a small, leather-bound notebook, its cover worn but sturdy. Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized the craftsmanship. It was personal, intimate, something that carried the weight of hidden thoughts and private confessions. His hands shook as he reached for it, feeling the texture of the leather, sensing the gravity of what lay inside. Every nerve in his body screamed that this notebook contained truths that would irrevocably alter his perception of Olivia, of their marriage, and of the life he had carefully curated. As he flipped open the first page, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The handwriting was unmistakably Olivia's, elegant yet hurried, the words revealing moments of doubt, secrecy, and hidden emotions that had never been shared with him. Each line cut deeper than the last, peeling back the layers of a relationship he thought he understood. The sense of betrayal was acute, yet beneath it, there was also a hint of vulnerability, a glimpse into the fears and struggles Olivia had concealed from him. Marcus sank back into the chair, overwhelmed by the revelations. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman he loved with the truths now laid bare before him. The stranger stood silently, their presence both comforting and intimidating, a witness to his unraveling, a guide to the hidden realities he had never imagined. Hours seemed to stretch into minutes as Marcus pored over the contents of the notebook, the photograph, and the subtle cues the stranger had provided. Every page, every detail, added a new layer of complexity, forcing him to confront not just Olivia's actions, but his own assumptions, his own blindness to the subtle shifts in their relationship. The night had transformed from a simple dinner into a labyrinth of discovery, a journey into the heart of secrecy, trust, and human complexity. Finally, Marcus looked up, meeting the stranger's gaze. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, voice trembling but steadying. The stranger smiled faintly, enigmatic yet reassuring. "Because you deserve the truth," they said simply. And in that moment, Marcus understood that whatever challenges awaited him, whatever choices he had to make, he now possessed the clarity to face them. The night was far from over, But for the first time, he felt a sliver of control, a sense of purpose amid the chaos. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, the photograph and notebook lying before him like relics of a life he thought he understood. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of Olivia, smiling alongside the stranger in the photo with the woman he had known for years. The kitchen, once a sanctuary of warmth and familiarity, now felt alien, almost hostile. The soft flicker of candlelight cast long, distorted shadows on the walls, turning ordinary objects into menacing shapes. Every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards, the distant roll of tires outside, was amplified in the tense silence, echoing the chaos in his mind. The stranger remained standing, a silent observer, their eyes calm, steady, unyielding. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice low, hoarse, laden with disbelief. Why? Why didn't she tell me? The question was rhetorical, a release of pent-up frustration, yet it demanded an answer, some semblance of logic or reason in the face of betrayal. The stranger's expression remained unreadable, almost detached, yet their presence radiated authority. Because you weren't supposed to know yet, they replied simply. The words sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. Supposed to know? What do you mean? The stranger stepped closer, the subtle click of their shoes on the hardwood floor drawing Marcus's attention. Olivia's been navigating something far bigger than either of you imagined, they said, voice calm, controlled, yet underlined with an urgency that Marcus couldn't ignore. There are elements in her life she couldn't share, people, circumstances, threats that required discretion. Marcus's mind recoiled at the thought. Threats, people, circumstances. His pulse spiked as he tried to envision what could have compelled Olivia to hide so much. To cloak her actions in secrecy, he took a deep breath, struggling to steady the storm of emotion inside him. And the photograph, the notebook, the lies. His voice cracked, the weight of betrayal pressing down with oppressive force. The stranger's gaze met his, unwavering. The photograph is a fragment, a glimpse into the world she had to navigate without your knowledge. The notebook contains her thoughts, fears, and the difficult choices she faced. It's not a betrayal, it's survival, strategy, and protection. Everything she did had reason, even if it seems inexplicable to you now. Marcus felt a bitter mix of relief and anger. Relief, because perhaps Olivia hadn't been unfaithful in the conventional sense, and anger because the secrecy had cut him deeply, eroding the trust they had painstakingly built. He sank back into the chair, running a hand through his hair, heart pounding. His mind flickered through countless scenarios. What could be so dangerous, so urgent, that Olivia couldn't confide in him? The thought of her carrying this burden alone, masking fear and strategy behind a veneer of normalcy, ignited both guilt and empathy within him. He had been waiting for a romantic evening, for reconciliation, and instead he was confronted with the hidden complexities of her life, complexities he had never imagined. The stranger moved to the counter, placing another object in front of Marcus, a small, leather-bound folder, edges worn but sturdy. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. His curiosity piqued, despite the turmoil. He opened it carefully, discovering a series of documents, correspondence, notes, and maps that hinted at connections, arrangements, and encounters beyond his understanding. Each page revealed new layers of intrigue, yet also explained the secrecy, the long nights, the distracted demeanor, and the odd, unexplained behavior Olivia had exhibited in recent months. As Marcus sifted through the folder, a sense of disbelief mingled with comprehension. The revelations painted a picture of Olivia as both vulnerable and resilient, navigating treacherous circumstances while shielding him from harm. She had been forced to make difficult choices, balancing love, loyalty, and survival. The anger Marcus had felt moments earlier began to soften, replaced by a profound understanding of the complexity of her position. Yet the pain of feeling excluded from her struggles remained, a bitter reminder of the distance that had grown between them. Marcus's thoughts flickered back to the dinner he had prepared. The meticulous care with which he had set the table, the candles, the wine, the scene felt almost absurd now. Juxtaposed against the gravity of the revelations before him, he realized that the dinner had been a symbol of his desire to connect, to reclaim intimacy. Yet life had delivered something entirely different, an unplanned confrontation with truth, secrecy, and the fragility of trust. The contrast was stark, almost surreal, and it left Marcus reeling. The stranger watched him carefully, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. "You must understand," they said, breaking the silence. Olivia didn't hide these things out of malice or deceit. She hid them because the consequences of disclosure could have been catastrophic, not just for her, but for you as well. Marcus leaned forward, absorbing the words, grappling with the enormity of the situation. Every instinct in his body urged him to question, to demand clarity. Yet he recognized the underlying truth. The night was a turning point, an invitation to confront reality as it truly was, without the comforting illusions he had relied upon. He glanced at the photograph again, the image of Olivia with the stranger now reframed in his mind. No longer a simple act of betrayal, it was a fragment of a larger narrative, one filled with nuance, risk, and moral complexity. Marcus felt a mixture of relief, regret, and admiration. Relief that she had been acting to protect, regret that he had misunderstood her actions, and admiration for her resilience in navigating the labyrinth of hidden threats and responsibilities. The stranger leaned closer, voice lowered to a near whisper. "There's something you need to do next, Marcus. It's time to confront what's happening directly. To face the challenges that lie ahead. Only then will you understand the full measure of what she has endured and what choices remain." Marcus's stomach tightened. Confrontation, direct action. It was exactly what he feared, yet instinctively knew he had to undertake. The weight of responsibility pressed down, but within it also lay the potential for clarity, for reconciliation, for a deeper understanding of Olivia and their relationship. Marcus rose from his chair, heart still pounding, mind racing, yet a sense of purpose began to form. He understood that passivity was no longer an option. The night, with its shadows, secrets, and unexpected revelations, demanded courage, decisiveness, and resilience. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the steps ahead, aware that every choice now carried weight, that every action could either heal or further fracture the fragile bond he had fought to maintain. The stranger stepped back, as if acknowledging Marcus's resolve. Silence filled the room once more, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the gutter outside. Marcus felt a strange clarity amid the chaos, the understanding that he was about to enter a pivotal chapter of his life, one where trust, truth, and emotional resilience would be tested beyond anything he had previously known. He glanced toward the kitchen table, the remnants of the prepared dinner, now seeming almost ceremonial, a testament to intentions, effort, and the desire for connection. The candles flickered, shadows dancing across the walls, echoing the uncertainty and tension that filled the room. Marcus knew that the events of the night would irrevocably alter his perception of Olivia, of their marriage, and of himself. Yet within that awareness was also the seed of empowerment, the knowledge that facing truth, no matter how uncomfortable or painful, was the only path forward. Finally, Marcus allowed himself a moment to center his thoughts, to gather strength, to prepare for the confrontation that awaited. The stranger's presence, far from menacing now, felt like a guide through the maze of secrecy and deception. Marcus understood that he could no longer cling to illusions or expectations. The night had delivered clarity in the form of complexity, and it was his responsibility to navigate it with courage, insight, and emotional fortitude. He took a step toward the front door, then paused, glancing back at the stranger. "I need to speak with her. Now," he said firmly, voice steady despite the storm of emotion within. The stranger nodded, a subtle affirmation of the path forward. Marcus felt a surge of determination, a renewed sense of agency. As he prepared to face Olivia, to uncover the truths, and to confront the tangled web of secrecy, loyalty, and emotion that the night had revealed, every instinct, every fiber of his being, told him that the hours ahead would be transformative. The photograph, the notebook, the folder, all of it was only the beginning. What awaited beyond the threshold of the front door would test the limits of trust, love, and understanding. And Marcus, for the first time that night, felt ready to meet it head-on. Marcus's hand lingered on the doorknob for a long moment, a weighty pause between the life he thought he knew and the reality now pressing down on him. The stranger remained behind, a silent sentinel, their presence almost comforting in its quiet authority. Marcus drew in a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs with a mixture of anticipation, dread, and determination. He knew that crossing this threshold meant confronting not only Olivia, but also the truths he had long ignored, the subtle cracks in their marriage that had gone unnoticed until tonight. Each step toward the door felt like moving through a fog, uncertain but inevitable, leading him toward revelations that would forever alter his understanding of love, loyalty, and trust. As he opened the door, the cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp pavement and rain-soaked leaves. The street outside was quiet, the only sound, the faint hum of distant traffic, and the occasional rustle of wind-blown debris. Marcus's eyes scanned the darkness instinctively, seeking any sign of Olivia. He could see her now, emerging from the shadow of the street lamp, silhouetted against the soft glow of its light. But even from this distance, something was different, her posture tense, her movements deliberate, and an air of guarded urgency surrounding her. It was not the warm, familiar presence he had anticipated. "Olivia," Marcus called softly, his voice trembling despite the effort to steady it. The sound of her name seemed to hang in the air, heavy with emotion, a fragile thread connecting them across the chasm of misunderstanding and secrecy. She paused, glancing in his direction, eyes narrowing slightly, as though assessing him, weighing the weight of the night, the photograph, the notebook, and all the unspoken truths that had come to light. Marcus's pulse quickened. He realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that this moment would determine the trajectory of not only their relationship, but also the emotional landscape of his life. She approached cautiously, each step deliberate, a measured pace that betrayed both confidence and uncertainty. Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes, the subtle quiver in her hands. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze locked on his, and for a long, suspended moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, almost tangible, filled with unspoken words, withheld confessions, and the weight of accumulated emotion. Marcus's chest tightened as he tried to summon the courage to break the barrier, to bridge the distance that had been growing for months, now exacerbated by the revelations of the stranger and the contents of the photograph and notebook. "Marcus," she finally said, her voice low, deliberate, carrying a mixture of caution and urgency. "We need to talk." The simple words, while unassuming in structure, carried the weight of everything unsaid, every secret hidden in the crevices of their lives. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard, and gestured toward the kitchen. "Inside," he said, voice steadier than he felt, though his stomach churned with apprehension. Olivia's eyes flicked briefly to the stranger, still lingering at the doorway, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them, before she stepped forward, the tension in her movements betraying the careful composure she tried to maintain. Once inside, Marcus gestured for her to sit at the table, the carefully prepared dinner, now an almost ironic backdrop to the confrontation about to unfold. The stranger retreated to the corner of the kitchen, an observer yet invisible, giving Marcus the space to face Olivia alone. He could feel the weight of the photograph and notebook pressing on him, even now. The tangible evidence of her secrets, a constant reminder of the complexity of their predicament. He took a seat across from her, hands clenched lightly in his lap, heart pounding with a cocktail of anger, fear, and an aching need for clarity. Olivia sat, a deliberate distance between them, her eyes never leaving his. For a long moment, the tension was suffocating, the unspoken truths stretching across the small expanse of the table. Marcus tried to steady his breathing, to prepare himself for whatever explanations she might offer, knowing that the coming conversation would demand honesty, courage, and the willingness to confront both past mistakes and present realities. Marcus, she began, voice measured yet fragile, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Her eyes, dark and expressive, searched his face for a reaction, a clue, a hint of understanding or anger. Marcus's throat tightened. Like this? He asked, gesturing vaguely toward the photograph and notebook, still clutched in his hands. Do you realize what I just saw? What I've been holding in my hands while I waited for a dinner that meant nothing compared to this betrayal. His voice rose slightly, not in anger alone, but in the raw anguish of a man blindsided by the truth. Olivia flinched, a subtle acknowledgement of the pain he felt. She took a breath, a small, deliberate inhale, and then spoke again, carefully choosing each word. It's not betrayal, Marcus. Not in the way you think. Everything I've done, every choice I've made in secrecy, was to protect you, to protect us. Her words were almost fragile, yet beneath them lay an undeniable strength, a resilience that Marcus had often admired but never fully understood until now. He stared at her, disbelief, warring with the faint glimmer of understanding. Protect me, by lying, by keeping me in the dark. The anger and hurt in his voice were tempered by a rising need to comprehend, to understand the labyrinthine web of events that had brought them to this moment. Olivia's gaze softened slightly, a trace of guilt and determination mingling in her expression. Yes, she admitted, voice low but unwavering. I couldn't tell you everything, Marcus. Some things were too dangerous, too complex. I had to navigate them alone, to shield you from consequences you didn't deserve. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to keep you safe. Her words, while sincere, were layered with the weight of secrets and untold struggles, each syllable a delicate balance between honesty and necessity. Marcus's mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of her clandestine meetings, the notes, and the subtle shifts in her behavior with the woman before him, who now appeared vulnerable yet resolute. The dissonance was jarring, yet a part of him began to understand. The anger that had surged moments ago softened into a complex mixture of empathy, frustration, and awe at the resilience she had displayed in silence. He leaned back slightly, taking a deep breath, the emotional storm within him beginning to settle into a tense, focused clarity. Then tell me everything, he said, voice low, steady. I need to understand, Olivia. Not just the secrets, but the reasons, the stakes, the people involved. I can't help if I don't know. Her eyes, dark and earnest, met his, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a fragile truce, a willingness to bridge the gap that secrecy had wrought. Olivia nodded slowly, reaching for the notebook and photograph. I will, she said softly. But you have to promise me something first. You have to listen, really listen, without judgment, because what you're about to hear, it will change how you see everything. Marcus's stomach tightened, a knot of anticipation and dread settling deep within him. He nodded, resolute despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his courage. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across their faces, illuminating the tension, the fear, and the fragile hope that lingered between them. Marcus realized that this conversation, this unveiling of truth, was not merely about confronting past mistakes or hidden actions. It was about forging a path forward, about understanding the depths of human complexity, and about the difficult, often painful, journey of reconciliation and trust. And then Olivia began to speak, slowly, deliberately, unraveling the story, the choices, the dangers, and the intricate web of events that had shaped the past months. Marcus listened, heart pounding, mind racing, emotions whirling in a maelstrom of fear, love, and a desperate need for clarity. With each word, he came to understand that the night he had envisioned the simple dinner, the quiet reconnection, was but a facade, a prelude to a far more profound, life-altering revelation. He realized, in that suspended moment, that love was never simple, never neat. It was messy, complicated, demanding courage, understanding, and a willingness to confront not only the actions of others, but also the shadows within oneself. And as Olivia continued to speak, Marcus understood that the path ahead, though fraught with uncertainty and pain, also held the promise of redemption, clarity, and the possibility of a bond stronger for having survived the night's trials. The tension in the kitchen was almost tangible as Olivia's words began to flow, each syllable revealing layers of secrecy and danger that Marcus had never imagined. He sat, rigid, hands clasped tightly together, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drumbeat of both fear and anticipation. The notebook lay open between them, but Marcus barely glanced at it now. Her voice, the cadence, the pauses, conveyed more than any written word ever could. Every revelation she offered seemed to cast a shadow over the familiar room, transforming it into a stage for a drama he had been blind to for months. "I didn't want you to see me this way," Olivia confessed, her eyes shimmering in the flickering candlelight. "Entangled in things I couldn't control, forced to make choices that went against everything we had built together. I thought I was protecting you, protecting us. But now I see that keeping secrets has only hurt you." Her tone was heavy, laced with guilt and raw honesty. Marcus swallowed hard, trying to process the intensity of her confession, the emotions swirling inside him. Betrayal, fear, anger, love clashed violently, creating an almost unbearable tension in his chest. Marcus's mind replayed the past weeks, the subtle signs he had ignored, the sudden late nights, the hurried explanations, the distant glances. At the time, he had blamed himself, assumed he had somehow failed her, failed them, and now, confronted with the reality of her secret life, he felt a strange mixture of relief and devastation. Relief that she had not been unfaithful in the traditional sense, yet devastation at the scope of what she had endured without him. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to bridge the gap, but uncertainty held his hand frozen in his lap. "You have to understand," Olivia continued, her voice trembling slightly despite her composure. "I never wanted to lie, but there are people, circumstances, forces that you could never have prepared for. Every action I took, every meeting, every decision, it was calculated, meant to shield you from the fallout. I couldn't risk involving you until I knew we could both survive the consequences." Her words struck Marcus with the force of a hurricane. The weight of her burden, the invisible threads of danger and secrecy, were almost suffocating in their complexity. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the edge of the table, eyes locked on hers. "Olivia, why didn't you trust me?" he asked, voice low but edged with both pain and pleading. The question lingered in the space between them, heavy, almost unbearable. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze dropping briefly before meeting his again, shining with quiet resolve. "I did trust you," she said softly, "but sometimes trust alone isn't enough when lives are at stake. I needed to handle this, at least initially, so that I could protect you without putting you in immediate danger." Marcus felt the magnitude of her words wash over him. It was not simply a matter of marital secrecy. It was a complex dance of survival, strategy, and protection, executed with precision and fraught with risk. The anger and hurt that had consumed him moments ago now collided with empathy, creating a turbulent mix of emotion that left him both vulnerable and enlightened. He realized that the woman before him was not the deceitful partner he had momentarily imagined, but a figure of extraordinary resilience, navigating treacherous circumstances with courage he could scarcely comprehend. The kitchen, with its meticulously prepared dinner and softly flickering candles, felt almost surreal against the backdrop of these revelations. The mundane, the wine, the carefully plated dishes contrasted sharply with the gravity of the night's unfolding drama. Marcus noticed, almost reflexively, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands fidgeted with the edge of the table, the faint tremor in her voice despite her deliberate composure. Every detail spoke volumes, revealing the depth of the stress she had endured alone. "I need to explain everything," Olivia continued, her eyes dark, intense, and pleading. "There's more than just these meetings, these decisions. I've had to make alliances, negotiate, sometimes with people whose motives weren't entirely pure. I've had to navigate threats, deception, and even betrayal from unexpected places. And through it all, I carried the weight of knowing that one wrong move could destroy everything we hold dear." Marcus's mind reeled. The story she was revealing was complex, almost cinematic in its scope, yet the raw honesty in her eyes left no room for doubt. He understood, for the first time, that their lives had intersected with forces far beyond the ordinary, a labyrinth of danger, strategy, and moral compromise that demanded extraordinary courage. He ran a hand over his face, trying to steady himself. The betrayal he had imagined was replaced by awe, concern, and a profound respect. He felt anger at being kept in the dark. Yes, but it was tempered by the realization that Olivia's secrecy had been a form of protection, not deception for its own sake. Every choice she had made had been calculated, weighed against potential consequences, and executed with a precision he could only now begin to appreciate. Marcus's thoughts flickered to the stranger, still standing silently in the corner. Their presence, once intimidating, now seemed like a necessary guide, a stabilizing force helping him navigate the overwhelming revelations. He realized that without this intermediary, the confrontation could have spiraled, overwhelmed by raw emotion, and failed to reach the clarity now slowly emerging. "I never wanted you to feel betrayed," Olivia said, voice softer now, more vulnerable. "I only wanted to protect you, to protect us. I couldn't involve you until I knew I could guarantee your safety, our safety. I know it may seem impossible to understand, but every decision was made with that in mind." Marcus absorbed her words, letting the weight of their meaning settle into his consciousness. The complexity of the situation, the intricacies of survival, strategy, and protection were staggering, but beneath it all lay a clear thread of care and love. He took a deep breath, trying to untangle the web of emotion inside him. He realized that the night was no longer about anger or resentment. It was about understanding, connection, and the painstaking process of confronting truth. The photograph, the notebook, and the documents had provided fragments, but the dialogue, the conversation unfolding now, was filling in the spaces, revealing context, motive, and the difficult choices that had shaped the past months. Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly, feeling the tension in his body begin to ease slightly. I think I understand," he said quietly, voice tinged with both relief and lingering hurt. "Not everything yet, but I can see why you had to do what you did." Olivia's eyes glistened with a mix of gratitude and lingering worry. "It's not over, Marcus. There's still much you don't know, and the dangers aren't gone. But at least now, we can face them together." The statement, simple yet profound, shifted the energy in the room. Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to navigate the complexities alongside Olivia. Rather than being left in the dark or reacting solely out of fear, the night had begun, with suspense, betrayal, and shocking revelations. Yet now it hinted at a fragile possibility of reconciliation, trust, and partnership in the face of adversity. As they sat together, the kitchen no longer seemed entirely alien. The soft glow of the candles, the subtle warmth of the room, and the shared recognition of struggle and resilience created a tenuous bridge across the emotional chasm that had opened earlier. Marcus realized that this night, with all its twists, revelations, and suspense, was a turning point not just for understanding Olivia, but for understanding himself. His capacity for empathy, patience, and courage in confronting uncomfortable truths. He reached for her hand across the table, a small gesture of connection, tentative yet meaningful. Olivia's fingers met his, and for the first time that evening, a sense of fragile solidarity passed between them. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with unanswered questions and lingering threats. Yet in this moment, Marcus understood that they could navigate it together. The night had tested them, revealed vulnerabilities, and laid bare truths, but it had also created an opportunity for growth, understanding, and deeper connection. Marcus leaned back slightly, allowing himself a moment of reflection. The photograph, the notebook, the mysterious stranger they had all forced him to confront uncomfortable realities, to reassess assumptions, and to appreciate the complexities of human behavior, loyalty, and love. And while the night was far from over and the challenges ahead remained formidable, he felt a glimmer of clarity, a sense of readiness to face whatever came next. Armed with understanding, empathy, and the resolve to protect both truth and the fragile bond they shared, the night air in the kitchen had shifted. Where there had once been tension, confusion, and a storm of emotions, a fragile sense of anticipation now lingered. Marcus held Olivia's gaze, both searching for truth and willing to understand the complexity of her choices. But even as he tried to absorb her words, his mind could not stop spinning through possibilities, scenarios that seemed almost cinematic in their gravity. The photograph and notebook still lay on the table, silent witnesses to the chaos that had brought them to this moment, fragments of a larger story that was only now beginning to take shape. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes glistening, voice steady yet vulnerable. "There's more you need to see, Marcus. More than the photograph, more than the notebook. I kept a journal, separate from this one, something I never intended you to find. It details the people, the conversations, the plans I've been forced to navigate." Her hand reached under the table, producing a thin, leather-bound book, its edges worn from frequent handling. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Every instinct warned him that the contents would shift everything he thought he knew. He took it slowly, reverently, feeling the weight of her trust, the gravity of what he was about to uncover. He opened the journal carefully, each page a window into her secret world. Names, dates, locations, details. Marcus could barely comprehend. He scanned each line, realizing the extent of her entanglement in matters far beyond their personal lives. Olivia had been negotiating, reasoning, and maneuvering in situations fraught with potential danger. Marcus's pulse quickened as he read of meetings in dimly lit rooms, whispered conversations that could tip alliances, decisions made to avert unseen threats. The sheer scale of her burden was staggering. What is all this?" Marcus asked, voice barely above a whisper. The weight of comprehension pressed down on him. Olivia's gaze was unwavering. "It's the truth of what I've been managing, Marcus. The lives at stake, the dangers you couldn't see, the people who wouldn't hesitate to harm us if they knew. I carried it alone because you shouldn't bear it yet." Her words were heavy with implication. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he absorbed each revelation, the boundaries of trust and betrayal blurring into a complex mosaic of necessity, love, and survival. He sank back in his chair, trying to process the intricate web of secrecy and danger. The photograph, once a symbol of betrayal, now seemed almost innocuous, a fragment of a much larger puzzle. Marcus realized that he had misjudged her intentions, and that the secrecy, while painful, had been an act of protection. The anger that had flared earlier transformed into a complicated blend of respect, fear, and empathy. He had imagined betrayal as simple, black and white, but the reality was infinitely more complex, Olivia continued, her voice low but unwavering. "I never wanted to lie to you, Marcus. Every choice I made, every secret I kept, was to safeguard you, to ensure our survival. But there's one more thing someone you don't know has been influencing events behind the scenes, someone whose motives are not entirely pure. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He had anticipated twists, revelations, even betrayal, but the notion of an unseen third party manipulating events heightened the suspense to an almost unbearable degree. His mind raced, attempting to anticipate who, why, and to what end. He could feel the gravity of the situation pressing on him, the familiar comfort of the kitchen and the dinner table, now eclipsed by the magnitude of the unknown. The air felt heavier, charged with the potential for danger, revelation, and confrontation. Marcus realized that he was standing on the precipice of a night that would redefine not just his understanding of Olivia, but of trust, loyalty, and human complexity itself. "Who?" Marcus asked, voice trembling. His hands tightened around the journal, knuckles white. Olivia's eyes met his, unflinching. "Someone connected to your work. Someone who has been watching, influencing, and manipulating. They've made choices that ripple far beyond what you realize. And now, Marcus, you're in the middle of it." The words cut through him, sharp and precise. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too confining, as if the walls themselves held their breath, aware of the tension, the secrets, and the storm that had been unleashed. Marcus felt a surge of urgency, a combination of fear and resolve. He needed clarity, understanding, a plan. His mind raced through the possibilities. Who could it be? What were their intentions? How long had they been operating in the shadows? And how had Olivia managed to protect them both? The questions were relentless, yet they propelled him forward, forcing him to confront the realities he had so carefully ignored. Until now, he looked at Olivia, studying her carefully, searching for any hint of deception or misdirection. Her gaze was steady, intense, filled with both vulnerability and determination. Marcus felt a flicker of reassurance, a fragile anchor amidst the storm of uncertainty. He realized that despite the secrets, despite the danger, the woman before him was still the person he loved, still the person who had navigated unimaginable complexities to protect him. The realization was both comforting and terrifying, a duality that left him both anxious and resolute. Olivia reached across the table, placing a hand lightly over his. "You have to understand, Marcus, the dangers aren't gone. The person involved, this unseen influence, still operates in shadows. We need to be cautious, deliberate, and prepared. But I trust you to act, to navigate this, because together we can survive it." Her words were a mixture of warning and reassurance, painting a clear picture of the stakes, while also affirming his agency in the situation. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to center himself, to absorb the gravity of her words. The journal, photograph, and documents had already altered his perception of the night, of Olivia, and of the complexity of the world they inhabited together. Now, faced with the additional revelation of a hidden manipulator, the stakes became even more acute. Every instinct screamed caution, yet Marcus felt a surge of determination. He would not be sidelined, left in ignorance, or paralyzed by fear. He had to act, to confront, to understand fully. If they were to navigate this together, he studied the journal again, scanning for names, dates, patterns, anything that could illuminate the hidden manipulations Olivia had mentioned. The entries detailed meetings in secret locations, cryptic notes about conversations, and careful observations of individuals whose intentions were unclear. Marcus realized that Olivia had been playing a high-stakes game, balancing information, timing, and relationships with a precision that demanded respect and admiration. The burden she had carried alone was staggering, yet she had done so with grace and strategy. Marcus felt a surge of empathy, coupled with a renewed sense of purpose. The anger he had felt earlier, the initial shock of betrayal, now transformed into clarity, resolve, and a commitment to understand fully before making decisions. He realized that the night, with all its twists, revelations, and suspense, had fundamentally altered his understanding of trust, love, and the dynamics of their relationship. The photograph, the notebook, the journal, and the unseen influence, they were all pieces of a puzzle that, when combined, painted a complex, multifaceted picture of human resilience, loyalty, and survival. Finally, Marcus leaned back, meeting Olivia's gaze with a mixture of determination and tenderness. "We'll face this together," he said firmly, voice steady. "I don't fully understand yet, but I trust you, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect us." Her eyes softened, a faint smile brushing her lips, a signal of fragile relief and cautious optimism. The tension in the room, while still present, had shifted from confrontation to collaboration, from suspicion to mutual resolve. The night was far from over. The dangers remained, the secrets were still numerous, and the unseen manipulator continued to operate in the shadows. Yet Marcus felt a newfound sense of agency, a clarity born from understanding, empathy, and the shared commitment to navigate the perilous terrain together. For the first time since the night had begun, he sensed a path forward fraught with risk. Yes, but illuminated by the strength of their bond and the courage they now shared. Marcus could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him. As Olivia began to recount the most critical moments of her secret struggle, the kitchen, once a place of warmth and domestic comfort, now seemed charged with electricity, every shadow stretching longer, every flicker of candlelight casting a dramatic, almost theatrical tone over their confrontation. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table, absorbing every word, every pause, every nuance in her tone. The tension in the room was palpable, a storm of emotions waiting to erupt, yet tempered by the fragile connection that remained between them. "You have to understand, Marcus," Olivia said, voice low but insistent. "I've been walking a tightrope for months. Every interaction, every decision was calculated to protect us both. But there's someone powerful, who has been manipulating events, steering outcomes, and watching us closely." Marcus felt his pulse spike. The idea of an unseen hand pulling strings behind the scenes was terrifying. Yet his curiosity surged, demanding clarity. "Who is this person? What do they want?" he asked, his voice a mixture of apprehension and urgency. Olivia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I can't say fully. Not yet. But their influence is far-reaching. They've been orchestrating scenarios that could have destroyed everything if I hadn't intervened. Every choice I made, every secret kept, was to counter their moves and to ensure we remained safe." Marcus's mind raced. The implications were staggering. The photograph, the notebook, the journal, all fragments of a larger narrative, now revealed to be intertwined with the machinations of a third party. The scope of Olivia's hidden world was staggering, yet the precision and thoughtfulness of her actions spoke volumes about her resilience and intelligence. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the weight of her revelations. "So, everything I've seen, everything I thought was betrayal, misunderstanding, it was all part of this." Marcus's voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Olivia nodded slowly. "Yes, I never wanted you to see it this way. I wanted to shield you, to let you experience life without the constant fear that comes with knowledge of their influence." The words, though soft, carried immense gravity. Marcus felt both relief and renewed tension. The relief that Olivia's actions were protective, not malicious. The tension from the knowledge that danger was still very much present. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside him. He realized that the night had evolved from a personal confrontation into a high-stakes scenario with broader implications. Every detail mattered, every nuance could signal risk, and every decision had to be made with precision. The kitchen, filled with the warm scent of the prepared dinner, now felt like a command center for a battle that neither of them had anticipated. Olivia leaned forward, placing her hands on the table, fingers lightly brushing Marcus's. "I've tried to anticipate their moves," she said, "but I can't do it alone anymore. I need you to trust me, to help me navigate what's coming next." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, a mixture of fear and determination. He realized that the night would demand not only emotional resilience, but also strategic thinking, courage, and unwavering attention to detail. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and the responsibility to act decisively weighed heavily on him. He looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of deception, but found only sincerity and vulnerability. "I trust you," he said firmly, voice steady despite the emotional turmoil swirling within him. "Tell me everything. I need to know what we're facing." Olivia's expression softened slightly, a faint glimmer of relief passing through her gaze. She began to recount the events she had carefully documented: the meetings, the threats, the moments when she had been forced to make impossible choices, balancing love, loyalty, and survival. As she spoke, Marcus felt a growing sense of urgency. The narrative she unveiled was complex, almost cinematic in its intricacy. He imagined shadowed rooms, whispered conversations, cryptic messages, and tense negotiations. The photograph and the journal were no longer anomalies. They were pieces of a puzzle, revealing a network of influence, manipulation, and danger that extended beyond their immediate awareness. Marcus realized that the person orchestrating these events was skilled, calculating, and relentless, someone who could alter the trajectory of their lives with a single decision. The room felt heavier with each passing minute. The silence between her explanations, punctuated by the occasional crackle from the fireplace and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Marcus could feel his pulse quicken, not just from fear, but from the weight of understanding. Olivia had been protecting him, shielding their lives from forces he had never imagined. And yet the cost of that protection had been secrecy, isolation, and the erosion of trust. Now, faced with the full scope, he realized that their survival depended on facing these truths together, with courage and clarity. "You understand why I couldn't tell you everything," Olivia continued, voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It wasn't a matter of trust or love, it was survival. Every secret kept, every deception, was designed to protect you, to protect us. I know it seems impossible to understand, but you need to know the stakes to act wisely." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the magnitude of her words. He felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief, empathy, and a renewed sense of responsibility. He now understood that the decisions ahead would demand both strategic thinking and emotional fortitude. Marcus's mind raced as he considered the implications. The stranger in the corner, silent but observant, had been a catalyst for this confrontation, a guide to navigating the labyrinthine challenges that had been concealed from him. He felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. The night had started with confusion and suspicion, evolved into revelation and understanding, and now seemed poised to become a turning point in their lives. Every decision made in the coming hours would ripple outward, affecting not only their relationship, but potentially the very fabric of the dangers they were confronting. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We'll face this together," Marcus said, voice low but resolute. "I don't know all the details yet, but I trust you. Show me what I need to see, and I'll act alongside you." Olivia's eyes softened, a faint smile brushing her lips. The connection between them, fragile but genuine, seemed to solidify amidst the chaos of revelation and suspense. Marcus realized that the night had transformed from confrontation into collaboration, from suspicion into shared purpose. Olivia handed him the journal and photograph, allowing him to study them with renewed understanding. Marcus examined each detail carefully, noting names, locations, and subtle cues that he had previously overlooked. He felt a sense of empowerment, a clarity emerging from the storm of secrets and uncertainty. The night's events had forced him to confront difficult truths, to reassess assumptions, and to recognize the strength and resilience of the woman he loved. Finally, Marcus leaned back slightly, meeting Olivia's gaze with a mixture of resolve and tenderness. "We'll navigate this together," he repeated, emphasizing the commitment he now felt, not just to understanding the secrets and dangers, but to maintaining their bond in the face of adversity. Olivia nodded, eyes glistening. a quiet acknowledgement of the shared journey ahead. The kitchen, though still filled with tension, now carried the subtle promise of unity, clarity, and mutual determination. As the night pressed on, Marcus realized that the events unfolding were more than a personal revelation. They were a test of trust, resilience, and emotional strength. The photograph, the notebook, the unseen manipulations, and the complex layers of secrecy had transformed a simple dinner into a crucible of understanding, empathy, and strategic foresight. He knew that the coming hours would demand his full attention, courage, and clarity, but he also understood that facing these challenges together with Olivia could ultimately strengthen their bond in ways he had never imagined. Marcus sat back in his chair, the journal and photograph spread before him like artifacts of a hidden world he had never known existed. Olivia's words still echoed in his mind, and with each passing second, the room seemed to shrink, compressing the tension into an almost unbearable weight. He had believed he understood betrayal, deception, and secrecy, but the revelations she had shared revealed a complexity that went far beyond the confines of their marriage, their domestic life, and even their imagination. Every fiber of his being was on high alert, as if the air itself carried the weight of unseen consequences waiting to unfold. Olivia leaned forward, voice quiet but intense. "There's something you need to see, something that will change everything you think you know about the past months." Marcus's heart raced. He had braced himself for explanations, justifications, even apologies. But the gravity in her tone suggested something far more consequential. His hands, resting on the edge of the table, clenched slightly as anticipation and dread intermingled in a knot of suspense. "What is it?" he asked, voice tight with urgency. She reached under the table, producing a small envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, sealed carefully. "I found this," she said softly, "and it explains the unseen influence that has been manipulating events around us. It's from someone I never expected to involve themselves, and it will clarify why I couldn't tell you the truth sooner." Marcus's pulse surged. He felt a chill ripple through him as he took the envelope in trembling hands, recognizing the weight of what it might contain. The small, unassuming paper held the potential to rewrite everything he thought he knew. He slit the envelope open slowly, carefully, as if the act itself might shatter the fragile composure he had been clinging to. Inside was a single letter, the handwriting elegant, deliberate, and unmistakably precise. Marcus read, eyes scanning each line, mind racing with questions and shock. The letter revealed that someone close, someone he had trusted implicitly, had been influencing events behind the scenes, orchestrating scenarios that placed both him and Olivia in precarious positions. The manipulations, subtle yet far-reaching, had been designed to test loyalty, provoke reactions, and shape outcomes in ways he could never have anticipated. His stomach tightened. The notion that someone he knew, someone he had never suspected, was playing a calculated game with their lives sent waves of disbelief and anxiety coursing through him. Who wrote this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper, hands trembling as he refolded the letter. Olivia's eyes met his, calm yet unwavering. "Someone who has long held influence over you, Marcus. Someone whose motives aren't entirely clear yet, but whose reach has been extensive. They've been orchestrating events from the shadows. And now, with the secrets unveiled, we have no choice but to confront it." Marcus's mind raced. He thought of colleagues, friends, even family members, anyone who might have had access to the information, the means to influence outcomes, the motive to manipulate and control. Each possibility heightened the suspense, feeding the anxiety coiling in his chest. The room felt almost suffocating, the candlelight casting exaggerated shadows across the walls, as if the physical space itself mirrored the tension between revelation and danger. He glanced at Olivia, her expression resolute but tinged with vulnerability. "How do we stop them?" Marcus asked, desperation edging his tone. Olivia exhaled slowly. a controlled, deliberate breath that carried both determination and the weight of responsibility. First, we understand. Then, we act carefully. Every move must be calculated, every step deliberate. One wrong decision could escalate the danger exponentially. We have to be smarter than they expect, faster than they anticipate, and unwavering in our resolve. Marcus's heart pounded, a mixture of adrenaline and apprehension flooding his veins. The night had begun with a simple anticipation of a dinner, an attempt to reconnect, to bridge the growing distance between them. Instead, he found himself thrust into a complex web of manipulation, secrecy, and hidden threats. The twist, the revelation of a previously unseen actor influencing events, was more shocking than any betrayal he had imagined. It forced him to recontextualize everything he had perceived, every assumption about Olivia, every moment of tension, every unexplained behavior. He felt a surge of anger, tempered by a grudging respect. Whoever this manipulator was, they were clever, strategic, and relentless. But Marcus realized that dwelling on anger alone would not serve him. The only way forward was clarity, planning, and decisive action. He needed to understand the scope of the manipulations, the intentions behind each move, and the vulnerabilities that could be exploited by them or by the enemy. Olivia leaned closer, voice firm. "Marcus, you need to know this. The events of the past months, the meetings, the secrecy, the miscommunications were all influenced by this person. And while I've been shielding you, I can't do it alone anymore. You need to be aware, to act with me, to anticipate their moves." Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of dread and determination. He understood that the night was far from over, and that the coming hours would test every facet of their relationship, their intelligence, and their ability to navigate unforeseen threats. The photograph, once a symbol of personal betrayal, now took on a different significance. It was evidence, not of infidelity, but of circumstance, strategy, and unseen pressures. Marcus felt his perspective shift, understanding that Olivia's actions, though initially confounding and painful, had been rooted in protection, not deception. He could see now that their lives had been a stage for manipulation, and only by confronting the truth fully could they hope to regain control. He looked at the stranger still lingering in the corner, their presence quiet but watchful, an anchor in the storm of suspense. Marcus realized that this person had guided him to the moment of revelation, preparing him emotionally and strategically to face the manipulations at hand. The tension in the room was immense, but it was tempered by the clarity now emerging, a roadmap through the complexity if they dared follow it carefully. Marcus leaned forward, scanning the letter again, each word heavy with implication. He felt the intensity of the night pressing on him, a mixture of fear, urgency, and resolve coiling in his chest. The manipulator's identity remained unknown, yet the evidence of their influence was undeniable. Every choice, every subtle shift in behavior over the past months now appeared as a calculated response to pressures he had been blind to until this very moment. Olivia reached across the table, her hand brushing his. "We can't undo the past, Marcus, but we can take control of what comes next. We need to act, to strategize, to anticipate their moves, and we need to trust each other, fully, without hesitation." Marcus took her hand, feeling the warmth and resolve beneath the tension. The connection, though tested, was a lifeline, grounding him amidst the storm of revelation and suspense. He exhaled slowly, steeling himself for the decisions ahead. The twist, the revelation of the unseen manipulator, had elevated the stakes beyond personal betrayal into a high-stakes game of strategy, survival, and trust. Marcus realized that navigating the night ahead would require not just courage, but patience, calculation, and an unwavering commitment to partnership. The events of the past hours had irrevocably altered their relationship, but within that alteration lay the opportunity for growth, understanding, and, ultimately, resilience. Marcus met Olivia's gaze, his eyes steady now, heart racing but resolute. "We'll face this together," he said firmly. I don't know who this person is yet, or what they're capable of, but we'll figure it out. We'll act carefully, decisively, and we'll protect each other. Olivia's lips curved into a faint, hopeful smile, the first real sign of relief since the night had begun. The candlelight flickered over their faces, shadows dancing, echoing the complex interplay of fear, revelation, and determination now binding them together. The photograph, the journal, the letter, they were not just artifacts of deception or misunderstanding. They were instruments of awareness, guiding Marcus toward the full scope of the unseen manipulations. The night, which had begun as a simple domestic expectation, had transformed into a crucible of revelation, suspense, and strategy. Marcus understood now that the coming hours would test every aspect of their resolve, intelligence, and emotional fortitude. He leaned back slightly, hand still holding Olivia's, absorbing the gravity of the moment. They were no longer merely husband and wife navigating domestic tension. They were partners, confronting a hidden adversary, forced to reconcile trust, strategy, and emotional resilience. The twist had reshaped their reality, and the decisions ahead would define not just the night, but the foundation of their future together. Marcus felt a surge of determination pulse through his veins. The revelations of the night, the photograph, the notebooks, the letter, and Olivia's confession had shifted him from a man paralyzed by confusion and fear to one fully aware of the stakes before him. He could no longer sit idly, waiting for events to unfold. The unseen manipulator, the intricate web of influence and subtle threats, demanded action, and he realized that every moment of hesitation increased the risk not just to himself, but to Olivia. He pushed back from the table, the leather chair scraping softly against the floor, the sound resonating in the tense, candle-lit kitchen. Olivia watched him, a mixture of relief and anxiety flickering across her face. Marcus caught her gaze and nodded subtly, acknowledging both the gravity of the situation and the unspoken pact between them. They were no longer merely a couple navigating a domestic dispute. They were partners in a high-stakes confrontation, navigating a labyrinth of strategy, deception, and danger. The night's events had forced Marcus to reevaluate his assumptions about trust, loyalty, and the limits of his understanding. The dinner, the anticipation, the carefully prepared meal, all of it was now a backdrop to a far more significant, life-altering series of choices. He picked up the letter again, scanning the words meticulously. Every line revealed calculated intentions, the subtle maneuvers of someone with extensive knowledge of their lives and habits. Marcus realized that understanding these maneuvers would be critical. Each misstep could amplify danger. Each hesitation could be exploited. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. But instead of crushing him, it galvanized him. He was not just reacting to events. He was now in control of the next moves, equipped with information, awareness, and a resolve forged in the crucible of revelation. We need a plan, Marcus said, voice steady, low, carrying a decisive authority that surprised even him. Olivia nodded, eyes brightening slightly at his determination. Yes, she agreed. We have to anticipate every move. They've been manipulating events for months. And now that we know, we must act deliberately, without revealing our awareness prematurely. Timing, observation, and strategy are everything. Marcus felt the adrenaline spike, a cocktail of fear and focus sharpening his senses. The night's chaos was giving way to structured action, turning emotional turmoil into calculated determination. He began organizing the evidence, photographs, notes, the journal, and the letter. Laying them out on the table, Marcus analyzed each element for connections, patterns, and subtle cues that could hint at the manipulator's identity and intentions. The shadows from the candlelight played across the pages, accentuating their significance, transforming the kitchen into an impromptu war room. Each piece of information was a clue, a key to unraveling the strategies that had been working against them for months. He realized that the manipulator's skill lay not in overt aggression, but in subtle control, in shaping perceptions, influencing reactions, and exploiting vulnerabilities. Olivia contributed actively, recounting sequences of events and adding context to each document. Her knowledge, previously hidden from Marcus, now became a crucial asset. Together, they began to construct a mental map of the manipulator's moves, motives, and possible next steps. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her resilience, her ability to navigate danger with precision and foresight, while shielding him from the burden. The complexity of her actions was almost overwhelming, yet her calm demeanor and methodical explanations provided the clarity Marcus desperately needed. He noted the manipulator's patterns, the timing of interventions, the subtle psychological pressure applied, the careful observation of reactions. Marcus realized that to counteract these moves, he would need to anticipate, adapt, and remain several steps ahead. His mind, once clouded with shock and betrayal, was now sharp, focused, attuned to every detail. The transition from confusion to strategic awareness marked a turning point as he recognized that inaction was no longer an option. The stranger, still in the corner, observed quietly, their presence a stabilizing force. Marcus realized that this person had guided him through the initial chaos, providing the necessary perspective to confront reality rather than react emotionally. He felt a mixture of gratitude and resolve. The night had forced him into awareness, and now it was time for action, for deliberate engagement with the threats they faced. Marcus leaned toward Olivia, lowering his voice. "We need to create contingencies. We can't let them predict our moves. If they think they have control, they will exploit it. But if we anticipate, adapt, and coordinate, we can regain the advantage." Olivia nodded, her face a mix of determination and concern. "We'll need to communicate carefully, observe closely, and prepare for every possible scenario. It won't be simple, and mistakes could be costly. But together we can navigate it." The sense of shared purpose electrified Marcus, replacing fear with a controlled urgency. Fear transformed into resolve. He spent the next hour meticulously organizing their approach. Each piece of evidence, each note, each subtle clue from the journal became part of a strategic framework. Marcus and Olivia cross-referenced events, aligned timelines, and identified weak points in the manipulator's influence. Every observation, no matter how minor, was critical. Marcus felt a heightened awareness of the stakes, a clarity that brought focus to the chaos of the night. Finally, he stood, running a hand through his hair, and met Olivia's eyes. "We're ready to act," he said, voice firm, carrying a conviction that resonated in the charged atmosphere of the kitchen. Olivia's expression softened, a fleeting smile of cautious hope breaking through the tension. Marcus knew that the coming confrontation would be perilous, that the manipulator's next moves could test every aspect of their strategy, their courage, and their emotional resilience. But for the first time that evening, he felt the surge of control, the knowledge that they were no longer passive victims of circumstance, but active participants shaping the outcome. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation. Marcus felt his senses sharpen, every detail now registering: the flicker of the candlelight, the subtle creak of the floorboards, the distant sound of tires on wet pavement. Each element was a potential clue, a variable in the complex interplay of strategy and reaction. The night had shifted from revelation to preparation, from shock to action, and Marcus felt the weight of responsibility, but also the empowerment that came from awareness and foresight. He turned to Olivia, gripping her hands lightly. "We face this together. Every step, every decision, we act as one. We anticipate, we adapt, and we protect each other." Olivia nodded, eyes steady, reflecting trust and resolve. The candlelight danced across their faces, highlighting determination etched with vulnerability and courage. Marcus knew the night was far from over. The manipulator remained an unseen adversary, and the challenges ahead were formidable. Yet, In this shared determination, he found a spark of hope, a foundation for confronting the unknown with clarity and unity. As the first hints of dawn threatened the horizon, Marcus felt the gravity of the hours ahead. The strategies they had laid, the observations, the careful alignment of knowledge would be tested imminently. But he no longer felt helpless, no longer overwhelmed by uncertainty. The night had forged him into a participant in the unfolding drama, transforming fear into deliberate action, chaos into a roadmap for navigating the unseen threats that lay in wait. With a final glance at the notes, the photograph, and Olivia, Marcus exhaled slowly, centering himself. The night had begun as anticipation for a simple dinner, had spiraled into revelation, suspense, and exposure to hidden manipulations. Now, it had become a turning point, a crucible in which courage, strategy, and trust would be tested. He felt ready emotionally, mentally, and morally to confront the manipulator, to reclaim agency, and to protect the fragile bond that had endured months of secrecy and danger. Marcus stood in the center of the kitchen, the candlelight casting long shadows across the walls, each flicker accentuating the tension that had settled like a dense fog. Every muscle in his body was taut, his senses heightened, alert to the faintest sound, the slightest movement, the events of the night, the photograph, the journal, the letter. Olivia's revelations had culminated in this pivotal moment. He knew, instinctively, that the coming confrontation would define the trajectory of their lives, the fragile equilibrium of trust, and the outcome of the manipulations that had been orchestrated for months. Olivia moved closer, her expression resolute yet edged with anxiety. She had been both a guide and a guardian throughout the night, revealing only what Marcus was ready to confront, preserving his capacity for reason and strategy. Her presence was grounding, a lifeline amid the storm of revelations. Marcus took a deep breath, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Every detail, every document, every subtle cue now converged into a singular, critical objective: to confront the manipulator, to reclaim control, and to protect themselves from the cascading consequences of secrecy and deception. The first step, Marcus realized, was observation. The manipulator had always operated in the shadows, exploiting subtle psychological tactics, influencing decisions, and shaping outcomes without overt confrontation. Marcus's mind raced as he analyzed every pattern, every behavioral anomaly he and Olivia had documented. The faint sounds of movement outside, the intermittent hum of distant traffic, the soft creak of the floorboards, all became data points in a complex calculus of anticipation. He recognized that the manipulator's advantage lay in their ability to remain unseen, their ability to manipulate events indirectly. Marcus knew that to counteract this advantage, he had to anticipate, predict, and act decisively. Olivia placed a hand gently on his arm. "Marcus, they're testing us, probing for weaknesses. We can't let our emotions dictate the next steps. We have to stay focused, deliberate, and precise." Her words, calm yet urgent, reinforced the gravity of their situation. Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He realized that inaction was no longer an option. The manipulator's influence had already caused disruption, and every second of hesitation could amplify the stakes. He reviewed the evidence again, the photograph showing Olivia in a controlled, staged encounter, the notebook containing meticulous records of interactions, observations, and contingencies, the letter outlining the manipulator's expectations, subtle pressures, and strategic nudges. Each piece revealed not just the manipulator's influence, but also their meticulous attention to detail, their capacity to predict reactions, and their willingness to exploit vulnerabilities. Marcus understood that confronting them would require not just courage, but a deep understanding of psychology, timing, and the careful orchestration of countermeasures. The first move, Marcus decided, had to be strategic. They couldn't simply confront the manipulator head-on without preparation. The manipulator thrived on chaos and surprise. Any visible panic or misstep could be exploited, Marcus felt his pulse quicken, the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest, yet the clarity of purpose steadied him. Every observation, every pattern, every subtle signal now coalesced into a coherent strategy, a roadmap for engagement, anticipation, and response. He outlined a sequence of actions with Olivia, her input precise and informed by months of clandestine maneuvering. Each contingency accounted for potential reactions, counter-reactions, and hidden tactics. They mapped out safe zones, exit strategies, and communication signals, transforming the familiar kitchen into a tactical command center. Marcus felt a surge of empowerment. The chaos of revelation was now being channeled into deliberate, controlled action. The first sign of escalation came suddenly, a faint creak from the hallway beyond the kitchen. Marcus's senses sharpened instantly, heart pounding. The manipulator was approaching, testing boundaries, probing for responses. Marcus adjusted his stance, positioning himself strategically near the counter, hands ready to react, eyes scanning for movement, subtle cues, anything that might reveal the intruder's intentions. The air was thick with suspense, each second stretching, heavy with possibility and danger. Olivia whispered, her voice a steady anchor amidst the tension. "They're here. Remember, Marcus, precision and observation. Don't react emotionally, anticipate." Marcus's breathing slowed, controlled. As he absorbed her words, he knew that a single misstep could be catastrophic. The manipulator's advantage lay in unpredictability, yet Marcus now possessed knowledge, awareness, and the clarity of focus necessary to counter it. A shadow shifted near the doorway, elongated and deliberate. Marcus's eyes followed the movement, noting the posture, the cadence of steps, the subtle shifts in balance. Every detail was critical. The manipulator was close, their presence almost palpable, and Marcus felt the weight of anticipation, the electrifying tension that comes with imminent confrontation. The candlelight flickered violently, casting stark, dramatic shadows across the room. Marcus adjusted his position, every muscle coiled and ready. Then the voice came, low, controlled, yet edged with amusement. "Marcus, Olivia, you've uncovered more than you were supposed to." The tone sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. The manipulator had entered the room, though the figure remained partially obscured by shadows. The strategic positioning, the subtle confidence, the calculated delivery all revealed the person's meticulous planning and psychological control. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline, tempered by focus. He could not let fear dictate his actions. Olivia stepped closer to him, her presence steady, her gaze unwavering. "Marcus," she said softly, "remember what we've planned. Observe, anticipate, and act decisively when the moment is right." Marcus nodded subtly, absorbing the reassurance, his focus sharpening. The manipulator continued to speak, revealing fragments of their knowledge, their predictions, their expectations, each word designed to provoke, unsettle, and test the resolve of both Marcus and Olivia. Marcus's mind raced. The manipulator's confidence, their control over the room, was formidable. Yet, it also exposed their reliance on psychological dominance. Marcus recognized the subtle cues, the calculated pacing, the deliberate pauses meant to elicit reaction. He felt the clarity of anticipation, the precision of counter-strategy crystallizing in his mind. The night, which had begun as a domestic expectation, had evolved into a high-stakes psychological duel, testing courage, intelligence, and emotional resilience. Finally, Marcus moved, deliberately, decisively, stepping slightly to adjust his positioning relative to both Olivia and the manipulator. His voice, calm yet assertive, cut through the tension. "We know what you're doing," he said, each word measured. "We understand your manipulations, your strategies, and your intentions. But you've underestimated us. We're not pawns to be moved. We act with awareness, precision, and resolve." The words carried the weight of conviction, authority, and emerging control. The manipulator's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing their face. though masked quickly by a practiced composure. Marcus felt the subtle shift in energy, a crack in the psychological dominance the intruder had maintained. Olivia's hand rested lightly on his arm, a grounding presence, reinforcing the alliance, the partnership, the unity against the unseen adversary. The room seemed to vibrate with tension, suspense, and the charged anticipation of the confrontation reaching its apex. Marcus now fully realized the magnitude of the night. The manipulator's influence, subtle and pervasive, had guided the events that brought them here. Yet the revelations, strategy, and unity of purpose had shifted the balance. The tension was now mutual, the psychological dominance shared, the outcome uncertain but poised on the edge of action. Every observation, every calculated response, and every moment of restraint would determine the trajectory of the night, the outcome of the confrontation, and the survival of trust, understanding, and partnership. Marcus felt the adrenaline coursing through him like liquid fire, a heightened awareness sharpening every sense. The manipulator stood across the kitchen, composed yet radiating a subtle menace that Marcus could feel in the marrow of his bones. Every shift of weight, every flicker of expression, every measured inflection of voice was a calculated tactic meant to unnerve, to provoke, to control. Marcus's jaw tightened, mind racing to anticipate each move, while his heart pounded relentlessly. The stakes had never been higher. This was no longer about mistrust or hidden secrets. This was about survival, strategy, and the preservation of the fragile equilibrium between him and Olivia. Olivia's hand found his, her touch, grounding him in the swirling tension. "Marcus, steady," she whispered. Voice low but urgent. "Observe, calculate, respond only when necessary." He nodded subtly, taking in a controlled breath. He could feel the manipulator watching, waiting, the subtle power of their presence pressing against him, testing his resolve. Marcus realized that the confrontation was as psychological as it was physical. One misstep, one flicker of hesitation, and the manipulator could exploit it, undermining every ounce of strategy and emotional composure they had painstakingly built over the past hours. The stranger's voice cut through the silence, measured and chilling. "I see you've come far, Marcus, but courage without comprehension is folly. You think you understand, yet you grasp only fragments of the orchestration surrounding you." Marcus's pulse quickened, a mixture of fear, anger, and determination surging through him. He met the manipulator's gaze, eyes unwavering, voice steady despite the thrum of tension in his chest. "I understand enough," he said, deliberately controlled. "To know that your control ends tonight. You've underestimated what it means to act with awareness, with partnership, with purpose." The manipulator's expression flickered a slight tightening around the eyes, a momentary lapse in composure. Marcus noticed it instantly. Years of observing subtle cues, coupled with the detailed analysis of Olivia's journals and correspondence, had honed his perception to an almost surgical precision. He realized that the manipulator's advantage was their ability to control through fear and uncertainty. The crack he had observed was an opening. He could not squander it. Olivia shifted closer, her presence both protective and empowering. "Marcus, stay focused. Trust yourself. Every detail counts." Her voice, calm yet resolute, steadied him further. The manipulation, the psychological pressure, the orchestrated tension, all of it now became a landscape of strategy that Marcus could navigate. The night had shifted from revelation to confrontation, from uncertainty to a calculated engagement. Every movement, every word, every measured response became part of a delicate dance aimed at regaining control. The manipulator's gaze sharpened, a subtle smirk forming at the corner of their mouth. "Impressive," they said, tone almost admiring. "But awareness is only part of the battle. Emotion can be your downfall." Marcus's chest tightened. He could feel the manipulator probing for cracks, for reactions that could be exploited. His mind worked furiously, cross-referencing the patterns, anticipating the psychological maneuvers designed to unsettle him. He recognized that composure, clarity, and emotional control were his weapons against the orchestrated tension. He spoke deliberately, calmly, choosing each word with precision. Emotion is not weakness. Awareness and action together are strength. You've tested us, pushed boundaries, manipulated outcomes, but we are not your pawns. We act with insight, with purpose, and with unity. The manipulator's smirk faltered, a subtle tightening of the jaw, betraying surprise at the firmness of Marcus's response. Olivia's hand squeezed his gently, reinforcing the alignment, the shared determination that now defined their stance. A faint noise at the doorway, a creak, subtle but deliberate, drew Marcus's attention. The manipulator's eyes flicked toward the sound, a micro-expression of irritation passing over their face. Marcus realized immediately. This was a test, a probe for reaction. The manipulator wanted him to flinch, to reveal vulnerability. Marcus did not. He remained still, controlled, his breathing steady, mind calculating the potential implications of every subsequent movement. The psychological game had entered its critical phase. Olivia leaned forward slightly, whispering, "They're looking for doubt. Show none. Every hesitation feeds them." Marcus nodded minutely, internalizing her words. He observed the manipulator's subtle adjustments, the way they shifted weight, the cadence of speech, the fleeting glances that betrayed thought processes. Each micro-movement was data, each slight inflection an opening. Marcus felt the power of analysis coalesce with emotional resilience, creating a framework from which he could act decisively when the opportunity arose. The manipulator's voice cut again, sharp, deliberate. "Very well, Marcus. Let us see how long your resolve can hold. Fear is a patient teacher, and patience can break even the strongest will." The words, meant to intimidate, now rang hollow against the armor of clarity and preparation Marcus had forged. He responded, voice firm, unwavering. "Fear is only a signal, not a master. It tells us where to focus, where to act, and when to strike. We are not broken. We are aware, and we will act accordingly." For a moment, silence settled over the room, a charged pause, heavy with anticipation. The manipulator's expression remained carefully neutral, but Marcus could sense the underlying calculation, the assessment of his mental and emotional fortitude. He felt the subtle shift of power, the movement of the knight from uncertainty to measured engagement. He was no longer reacting blindly. He was participating consciously, strategically, and with purpose. Suddenly, a soft, almost imperceptible shuffle emanated from behind the manipulator. Marcus's eyes darted, capturing the movement, analyzing its intent. It was a subtle challenge, a test of reaction. Marcus remained calm, noting the rhythm, the timing, the potential for escalation. Every instinct screamed vigilance, every muscle poised for action. He realized that the knight's confrontation was now a high-stakes duel of perception, anticipation, and emotional control. Olivia's hand rested on his shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the tension. "Trust yourself," she whispered. "The path is clear if you remain vigilant." Marcus exhaled slowly, centering himself. The manipulator's gaze, the tension in the room, the weight of anticipation, all were now elements in a carefully observed landscape of psychological engagement. He could feel the shift in the dynamics. Their dominance, once unchallenged, was now being tested, and Marcus recognized that the opportunity to regain control was imminent. He stepped forward slightly, maintaining composure, voice steady and clear. "We are ready," he said firmly. "Your manipulations end here. We act with knowledge, with resolve, and with the clarity that you have underestimated. The game is no longer yours to control." Olivia's presence at his side reinforced the statement, a unified front of emotional resilience and strategic awareness. The manipulator's subtle flinch, almost imperceptible, confirmed that Marcus's resolve had pierced the carefully maintained facade of dominance. The night had transformed fully. Revelation had given way to confrontation, suspense to high-stakes psychological engagement, and fear to strategic control. Marcus and Olivia, aligned and aware, now faced the manipulator with clarity and unity. Every observation, every calculated reaction, every measured word would determine the outcome of the night, the preservation of trust, and the reclaiming of agency over their lives. Marcus felt a surge of resolve course through him as he and Olivia surveyed the room, the manipulator now fully aware that their psychological grip was slipping. Every movement, every carefully measured word had led to this moment. The kitchen, once merely a domestic space, had transformed into a battlefield of intellect, strategy, and raw emotional intensity. Marcus knew that subtlety alone would not suffice. Decisive action was required. The manipulator's influence had to be confronted directly, evidence laid bare, and control reclaimed. Olivia leaned in, whispering, "We need to expose everything, Marcus. The lies, the manipulations, every hidden action. We have the proof. Timing and precision are crucial." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They had spent hours piecing together the evidence, the photograph, the journals, the letter, the subtle inconsistencies, the patterns of manipulation. All of it was now a weapon, a tool to dismantle the carefully constructed illusions that had governed their lives for months. He turned his attention to the manipulator, whose eyes flicked nervously between Marcus and Olivia. Marcus could sense the faint tremor of anticipation, the barely contained irritation at the loss of psychological dominance. The manipulator's confidence, previously unshakable, was now tempered by caution, a subtle recognition that their carefully orchestrated game was unraveling. Marcus's pulse surged. The opportunity was now, and every instinct told him that precision, not haste, would determine the outcome. Marcus began laying out the evidence on the table, methodically presenting each piece. The photograph, once a symbol of uncertainty, now illustrated strategy and consequence. The journals revealed timelines, intentions, and hidden alliances. The letter explicitly documented the manipulator's influence and designs. Marcus narrated carefully, emphasizing facts, highlighting connections, and drawing attention to discrepancies that the manipulator had hoped would remain concealed. Olivia supplemented, providing context, clarifying motivations, and connecting the dots that would otherwise remain obscured. The manipulator's composure began to crack. Subtle at first, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, a brief pause that betrayed their growing unease. Marcus noted every micro-expression, every hesitation, every shift in posture. He realized that the manipulator's strength lay in creating doubt and fear, in exploiting gaps in perception. By systematically presenting the evidence, they removed the advantage of uncertainty, forcing the manipulator into a reactive stance. "You've underestimated us," Marcus said, voice steady and firm. Every manipulation, every secret, every attempt to control outcomes revealed. The balance has shifted. The game is no longer yours. The words hung in the air, heavy with authority. Olivia's hand brushed his arm subtly, reinforcing the unity and strategic alignment they now shared. The manipulator's expression flickered with a mixture of disbelief and calculated composure, but Marcus could sense the subtle fraying at the edges of their confidence. The manipulator attempted a verbal counter, their tone smooth and controlled. "You think this proves anything? Context matters. You cannot comprehend the broader scope of my influence." Marcus met the challenge calmly, his mind sharp, his voice unwavering. "The scope may be large, but your methods are exposed. The evidence is clear. Your influence is contingent on secrecy and deception. Once revealed, it collapses." The manipulator's lips pressed into a thin line, the first overt sign of recognition that control had shifted. Marcus took the next step, presenting the final, critical piece of evidence, a correspondence revealing the manipulator's direct intervention in events that had affected Marcus and Olivia's relationship. The documents were explicit, detailed, and undeniable. The manipulator's subtle flinch was immediately apparent, a micro-expression of surprise and tension. Marcus's pulse quickened. The moment of confrontation was at its peak, and the evidence had delivered a decisive advantage. Olivia's voice joined his, calm yet incisive. "We trusted you. Even when we didn't understand, you used that trust to manipulate outcomes, to orchestrate events behind our backs. But the truth is now undeniable. Every act, every intention, documented and revealed." Marcus could see the manipulator's composure falter further, a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The psychological advantage had shifted entirely. They were no longer in control. Marcus and Olivia now dictated the terms. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. Every movement, every glance, every subtle shift in posture carried immense weight. Marcus felt a surge of empowerment, a combination of relief, determination, and a fierce sense of justice. The manipulator's attempts at intimidation and psychological dominance had been neutralized through preparation, evidence, and unwavering composure. Every calculated move Marcus had made in the preceding hours had culminated in this moment of strategic triumph. Marcus continued, voice deliberate. "Your actions had consequences unseen, calculated, and manipulative, but the exposure is final. You cannot manipulate what is now revealed. You must account for every decision, every interference, and every hidden influence." Olivia's eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement of the shared victory, the culmination of their hours of strategic alignment and careful planning. The manipulator's face, once confident, now showed cracks in the carefully maintained mask, a subtle tightening of the lips, a fleeting hesitation in posture, an almost imperceptible lowering of the eyes, all signs that the psychological dominance they relied upon had eroded completely. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, tempered by the awareness that emotional composure and continued vigilance remained essential. The confrontation was far from over. The manipulator could still attempt last-minute tactics, but the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. He laid out the final strategic framework for addressing the manipulator, emphasizing measured action, clear communication, and psychological composure. Olivia's input was precise, her understanding of patterns and behaviors instrumental in shaping the next steps. Together, they formed a unified front, combining insight, evidence, and emotional resilience to neutralize the manipulator's influence fully. Every detail, every observation, every strategic adjustment was now aligned toward reclaiming control and securing both their personal safety and emotional integrity. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the intensity of the night converge into a singular, decisive moment. The manipulator, now fully aware of their exposure, was forced to respond. Marcus and Olivia, unified, composed, and resolute, had transformed the night from a scenario of psychological vulnerability into a structured engagement of strategy, evidence, and empowerment. The culmination of hours of preparation, observation, and revelation had reached its apex, and the manipulator could no longer dictate the flow of events. Finally, Marcus spoke, voice firm and resolute. "We know everything. Your manipulations, your interference, your attempts to control outcomes, they end tonight. The evidence is undeniable, and you will answer for every action. There is no ambiguity, no room for deception. The power you wielded through secrecy has been stripped away." The manipulator's face registered the finality of the declaration. A moment of recognition that control had passed entirely into the hands of Marcus and Olivia. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension coalescing into a sense of measured triumph. Marcus and Olivia, having navigated deception, secrecy, and psychological pressure, had reclaimed agency, restored clarity, and neutralized the manipulator's influence. Every calculated step, every observation, and every measure of composure had contributed to this decisive moment. The night, which had begun as anticipation, for a simple domestic reunion had transformed into a crucible of revelation, strategy, and empowerment, culminating in the exposure and neutralization of the hidden adversary. Marcus's eyes met Olivia's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and cautious optimism. The manipulator, confronted with the undeniable evidence and the unwavering composure of their adversaries, had no further avenues of influence. Marcus realized that the night's events, though harrowing, had forged a stronger bond between them, a shared understanding of resilience, strategy, and the necessity of trust. Even amidst deception, the air in the kitchen was thick with tension and the faint scent of candle wax as Marcus and Olivia prepared to finalize the confrontation that had dominated the night. The manipulator's presence was subdued now, almost cautious, yet every subtle movement radiated a lingering threat. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation of the impending resolution. The hours of observation, analysis, and strategy had brought them to this precise moment, and he knew that every decision from here would cement the outcome. Olivia leaned in, voice quiet but firm. "Marcus, remember, clarity is our greatest weapon. Focus on the facts, the evidence, and the patterns. Emotion can cloud judgment, but it can also guide understanding. Balance both." Marcus nodded, absorbing her words, feeling the partnership between them solidify in the crucible of the night's trials. Together, they had analyzed every document, every photograph, every note. Together, they had anticipated the manipulator's tactics. Now, it was time for final confrontation, for the culmination of suspense, strategy, and emotional resolve. The manipulator, sensing the shift, attempted to regain some semblance of control. "You think you've won. Knowledge without execution is meaningless. The threads I've woven are already set in motion. You cannot undo what has begun." Marcus's gaze did not waver. He leaned forward, voice steady, precise, cutting through the lingering tension. "Execution without awareness is reckless. We've understood your moves, mapped your manipulations, and neutralized the advantage your secrecy provided. Tonight, the threads you thought you controlled are exposed, and you must account for them." The manipulator's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing across their face. They had underestimated Marcus's capacity to observe, analyze, and act under pressure. The intricate patterns of influence, the subtle nudges intended to provoke uncertainty, had been dismantled through preparation and collaboration. Marcus felt a surge of confidence, tempered with caution, as he observed the slight twitch in the manipulator's hand, the subtle hesitation in posture, and the micro-expression of unease. Each detail was a confirmation. The power had shifted. Olivia interjected gently, providing clarity and reinforcing their coordinated approach. "Everything is documented, every step, every influence, every hidden action. You've left a trail, and now it's exposed. There's no room for manipulation, no ambiguity. The truth is, before you, undeniable and comprehensive." Marcus felt the room tighten, the psychological pressure almost palpable. The manipulator's composure wavered further as they processed the meticulous presentation of evidence. Marcus could sense the internal calculation, the consideration of options, the attempt to reclaim dominance. But each moment of hesitation only strengthened their position. Marcus laid out the final documents on the table, methodically presenting the incontrovertible evidence of the manipulator's interference. Correspondence, detailed observations, and cross-reference timelines demonstrated the breadth and depth of the manipulations that had influenced Marcus and Olivia's lives. He spoke deliberately, each word chosen to assert authority and convey clarity. "We have the records, the observations, and the context. Everything you've done is now accountable. No deception remains, no strategy concealed. The night's events and the choices you've made are fully exposed, The manipulator's subtle attempt at a counter-argument faltered. Marcus had anticipated it, prepared for it, and countered with precision. Every claim, every action, every subtle maneuver has been documented, analyzed, and contextualized. Your influence is neutralized by the transparency you sought to avoid. The manipulator's face tightened, eyes narrowing as the reality of exposure crystallized. Marcus felt the surge of validation, but remained vigilant. The night was not yet over. There remained the potential for a last-minute gambit, a final attempt to destabilize the equilibrium. Olivia's hand rested lightly on Marcus's arm, a grounding presence that reinforced their alliance. Stay composed. The final reveal is ours. The evidence speaks for itself. Marcus drew in a deep breath, centering his thoughts, focusing on the facts, the sequence of events, and the clarity that had emerged from hours of suspense and revelation. Every muscle was poised, every nerve alert. As they prepared to deliver the culmination of strategy and confrontation, Marcus spoke again, slowly, deliberately, directing attention to the documentation spread across the table. Look closely. Every meeting, every intervention, every calculated step, all mapped. The hidden influence, the manipulations, the attempts to destabilize our relationship, they are fully exposed. There is no ambiguity. You have no control over the narrative anymore. The manipulator's eyes flickered, an almost imperceptible sign of panic beneath the carefully maintained mask of composure. Marcus sensed the shift, the psychological advantage, once held entirely by the intruder, now firmly in their hands. Olivia added context, narrating specific events and connecting them to the evidence. Each explanation, each linkage, demonstrated not just exposure, but accountability. The manipulator's confidence eroded further with each revealed fact, each logical connection, each documented instance of interference. Marcus felt the tension coalesce into clarity, the suspense transforming into tangible resolution. The manipulator's strategies, once seemingly impenetrable, now lay bare before their collective understanding. Marcus leaned forward, voice firm, commanding attention. Tonight, everything is illuminated. No more shadows, no more unseen influence. Every act, every subtle manipulation, every attempt to control outcomes has been exposed. You cannot act in secrecy anymore. You will be accountable for the consequences of your actions. The manipulator's lips pressed tightly together, eyes darting briefly across the room, searching for leverage, for an escape, for some residual control, but there was none. Marcus and Olivia had achieved dominance through preparation, clarity, and unwavering resolve. A tense silence followed, the room charged with the aftermath of revelation. The manipulator finally exhaled, subtle but audible, acknowledging the unavoidable truth. The power balance had shifted irrevocably. Marcus and Olivia's collaboration, their strategic alignment, and the meticulous presentation of evidence had neutralized every advantage previously held. The kitchen, once a domestic space, had become a theater of psychological and strategic triumph. Marcus allowed himself a brief, controlled exhale. The manipulator, now fully aware of their exposure, had no further options. The culmination of suspense, tension, and strategy had been achieved. Marcus and Olivia, aligned in purpose and unwavering in resolve, had reclaimed agency, restored transparency, and neutralized the manipulator's influence. The night's trials had forged a bond stronger than secrecy, strengthened by clarity, courage, and shared commitment. Finally, Marcus met Olivia's eyes, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had navigated revelation, suspense, psychological pressure, and manipulation. The manipulator's control was gone, and the equilibrium restored, not through confrontation alone, but through strategy, observation, and partnership. The night, which had begun with anticipation and fear, now carried the resonance of resolution, empowerment, and the hard-earned satisfaction of justice and accountability. Marcus exhaled fully, a mixture of relief, triumph, and cautious optimism settling over him. The manipulator, stripped of influence, could no longer dictate outcomes. The partnership he shared with Olivia, strengthened through the trials of exposure and strategic engagement, was now fortified, resilient, and prepared to navigate whatever future challenges might emerge. The night's suspense had reached its peak and had been resolved, leaving behind clarity, understanding, and the hard-earned restoration of balance. The tension that had gripped Marcus and Olivia for hours slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a heavy, almost surreal calm. The manipulator, now fully exposed and disarmed, remained seated across the kitchen table, their aura of control shattered by the meticulous unraveling of their schemes. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the tightness in his chest ease just slightly. The room, once charged with uncertainty, fear, and suspense, now held the quiet weight of resolution. Yet despite the apparent victory, the emotional residue of the night lingered, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and the slow dawning of comprehension. At the scope of what they had endured, Olivia leaned back, running a hand through her hair, eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. Shadowed by fatigue, yet softened by relief, Marcus observed her carefully, noticing for the first time the subtle tremor in her shoulders, the faint lines of stress around her eyes. Though the manipulator's influence had been neutralized, the cost of secrecy, fear, and isolation was visible in the woman before him. He reached out, taking her hand gently, feeling the warmth, the resilience, and the shared acknowledgement of the night's harrowing journey. "We made it," he whispered, voice tinged with emotion. Olivia nodded, her grip tightening briefly in response. Marcus took a deep breath, reflecting on the night. The confrontation had begun as a simple expectation of a dinner, an attempt to bridge distance and reconnect emotionally. It had spiraled into a complex web of revelations, psychological games, and manipulations that neither he nor Olivia had fully anticipated. Each piece of evidence, each subtle interaction, each calculated maneuver by the manipulator had forced them to adapt, respond, and ultimately reclaim control. The culmination of the night's suspense and strategic engagement had restored agency, but the emotional journey was far from complete. He looked at the manipulator, who now sat in silence, eyes cast downward, the carefully maintained mask of dominance replaced by resignation. Marcus felt a mixture of vindication and measured empathy. The manipulator's actions had tested them, pushed them to the brink, and exposed vulnerabilities. Yet the eventual resolution was not born of revenge, but of clarity, evidence, and the unwavering resolve to act decisively. He understood that justice in this context was procedural and emotional, a restoration of balance rather than a simple punishment. Olivia spoke softly, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Marcus, we need to make sure this ends cleanly. The manipulator's influence is gone, but the consequences of their actions linger. We must document everything, secure our space, and ensure that nothing remains ambiguous or exploitable." Marcus nodded in agreement. The night had demonstrated the potency of secrecy, subtlety, and psychological influence. To prevent recurrence, meticulous attention to detail and foresight were essential. Every document, every revelation, every nuanced observation had become part of their collective understanding, a framework to protect them from future interference. He reviewed the materials one last time. The photograph that had initially sparked confusion and fear, now reframed as a critical piece of evidence, the journals and notebooks detailing events, motives, and choices, the letters revealing manipulative interventions. Each element, once a source of anxiety and uncertainty, now contributed to a coherent narrative of truth and resolution. Marcus felt the satisfaction of clarity, the rare sense of being fully informed, and the empowerment that came from understanding the broader context. Olivia placed a hand on his arm, her gaze steady. "We've survived this night, Marcus. Not just physically, but emotionally. We've navigated deception, suspense, and the manipulations of someone who underestimated our resilience, the bond between us has been tested, and while it bears the marks of strain, it has endured. That endurance is proof of our strength and understanding. Marcus felt a swell of emotion at her words. The journey of trust, betrayal, and revelation had forged a connection tempered by adversity, and in that connection lay a profound sense of intimacy and solidarity. He reflected on the emotional journey they had undertaken. The initial shock, the confrontation with betrayal, the unraveling of secrets, and the ultimate exposure of the manipulator had demanded psychological agility, patience, and emotional resilience. Marcus realized that the night's trials had not only revealed external threats, but also illuminated internal dynamics. The capacity for empathy, strategic thought, and unwavering resolve. The lessons were profound. Trust could be tested without being destroyed. Clarity could emerge from chaos. And partnership could withstand even the most calculated manipulations. Marcus turned his attention fully to Olivia, noting the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the slight relaxation of her shoulders, the faint, almost imperceptible smile, the glimmer of relief in her eyes. Despite the fatigue, she exuded a quiet strength, a testament to her ability to navigate the complexities of secrecy, danger, and emotional strain. Marcus felt an overwhelming gratitude for her courage, foresight, and unwavering commitment to protect both him and their shared life. The night had revealed the depth of her resilience, and he now understood the magnitude of her sacrifices and strategic choices. He took her hand gently, intertwining their fingers. "We did it," he said softly, voice imbued with both relief and reverence. "We faced the uncertainty, the fear, the manipulations, and we emerged with clarity, with each other, and with the truth fully revealed." Olivia nodded, her eyes glistening, reflecting the flickering candlelight and the emotions that words could scarcely convey. Marcus felt a deep sense of closure, a rare equilibrium after hours of suspense, revelation, and psychological engagement. The manipulator, seated quietly, finally spoke, voice subdued and measured. "You've undone my influence? I see that now. There's no denying your awareness, your strategy, and your resolve. The night has revealed what I could not anticipate." Marcus listened carefully, noting the subtle humility in the admission, a tacit acknowledgement of the strategic advantage they had reclaimed. While the manipulator's presence remained, their capacity to control, influence, or manipulate had been conclusively neutralized. Marcus exhaled, a slow, deliberate release of the tension that had coiled in his chest for hours. The room, while still dimly lit, now held a sense of resolution and cautious peace. Olivia's hand rested on his arm, a grounding presence, reinforcing the unity and shared experience that had navigated them through the night's trials. Marcus reflected on the journey, the anticipation of dinner, the shock of revelations, the suspense, the manipulations, and the ultimate reclamation of agency. Each phase had built upon the previous, leading to this definitive moment of closure. Finally, Marcus leaned back slightly, eyes meeting Olivia's. "The night has tested us," he said quietly, "but it has also strengthened us, clarified our priorities, and shown us the value of trust, partnership, and strategic awareness. Nothing can ever diminish the resilience we've demonstrated tonight." Olivia's expression softened, a faint but genuine smile gracing her lips. The culmination of suspense, tension, and confrontation had yielded not just clarity, but a renewed sense of unity and emotional intimacy. Marcus looked around the kitchen, at the remnants of the prepared dinner, the scattered evidence, the faint flicker of candlelight casting shadows across the walls. The night had begun as an anticipation of reconciliation, had evolved into a complex web of secrets, manipulations, and suspense, and had culminated in the restoration of truth, strategy, and partnership. He realized that while the events had tested them to their limits, they had also revealed the profound strength and resilience inherent in both of them, individually and together. With a final glance at the manipulator, Now subdued and fully aware of their defeat, Marcus turned to Olivia. "We can move forward," he said firmly. Voice steady. "The danger is neutralized, the manipulations exposed, and our understanding strengthened. Tonight has shown us the depth of our resilience and the power of partnership. We've survived, and we've emerged stronger." Olivia nodded, her eyes reflecting both relief and cautious optimism. Marcus felt a sense of completion, a rare equilibrium following the tumultuous events of the night. The kitchen, once merely a domestic space, had been transformed into a testament to endurance, strategy, and emotional fortitude. Marcus and Olivia had navigated betrayal, suspense, manipulations, and psychological pressure, emerging with clarity, understanding, and renewed unity. The night's trials had forged a bond resilient against deception and uncertainty, demonstrating the power of shared resolve, meticulous strategy, and unwavering trust. Life often tests us in ways we never anticipate, revealing the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human spirit. Marcus and Olivia's night reminds us that love and partnership are not measured by ease or comfort, but by the courage to face uncertainty together, the patience to listen and understand, and the strength to act with clarity in moments of fear. True connection requires vulnerability, trust, and a willingness to navigate challenges as a team, even when the path is shadowed by doubt or deception. In every trial lies an opportunity to grow stronger, to deepen empathy, and to emerge with a renewed appreciation for the bonds that sustain us. Remember, the greatest victories are not just over external obstacles, but over our own fears, insecurities, and assumptions. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. How would you handle such challenges? And don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic, inspiring stories that explore the depth of human emotions and resilience.